much talked about November 16 governorship and Kogi West rerun senatorial election is here, and everyone is excited.
In Tombia, Iketiama, and electorate are still on the queue, waiting to cast their ballot.
Hello. Please don't go to bed just yet, because we have to give you updates. And you don't want to wake up tomorrow to be told stories. So it's better you stay on with the largest network of television in Africa to hear, bit by bit, updates of the events that are going on in Bayelsa and Kogi State, as we continue our coverage of the elections, the governorship elections and senatorial elections in Bayelsa and Kogi State. Senatorial only for Kogi State, and then some piecemeal elections in some polling units in Bayelsa State. Welcome to this session, and it's a session that promises to give you an update both on the ground and from experts who have continued to monitor the event of these two state elections. I remain yours, Femi Okeowo, with the pleasure of welcoming you to this session. From my end, let me tell you that the two elections in Bayelsa and Kogi State have already been held, but I will not say the elections have come and gone, because the process, the next very critical process of collation, is just about starting now. For now, collation of ballot is underway at the ward and local government levels. The election was categorized by violence in some polling centers, and it affected quite a number of the proceedings, with snatching of ballot box and also recording of some other skirmishes around the various venues. According to INEC National Commissioner in charge of Information and Voter Education, Mr. Festus Okoye, reports at INEC's disposal indicate that most the voters who were willing to cast their votes had the opportunity to do so. Some of them, however. He said, despite efforts by the Commission and promises of the political parties to promote peaceful elections and the signing of peace accord, there were reports of there were reports indicating that the process was in several places affected by thuggery and violence. As the Commission moves into the critical phase of result collation, INEC is calling on the general public, particularly in those two states, Bayelsa and Kogi, to be calm and assured voters in those states of the Commission's resolve to ensure that the elections are concluded fairly and credibly. As usual, we shall be joining the studios in Yenagua and Lokoja for updates of the collation. But here in the studio, I have a panel of personalities who, like I hinted earlier, while being here in Abuja, have been monitoring every move of the events that have been going on in those two states. I start from the person closest to me, the INEC's Deputy Director of Voter Education, Mr. Victor Alo. You're welcome to this session.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
And next to him is Kabir Adamu, a security risk management expert. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And we had him in the last session before we went on the series of news breaks. He is Honorable Ahmed Sajo, a former commissioner for information and strategy, Adamawa State. Honorable, you are welcome to this session.
Thank you very much.
I promised our viewers that we were going to give them updates. Let me start from you, Mr. Adoko. What update do you have for our viewers at this point?
Well, at this point, polling has closed in all the units where we deployed today. Collation has started in the ward, at what level? We call them registration areas. And our staff are all on ground at these levels to collect the results coming from the polling units. In some places, it's even possible now that collation has started at local government level in some places. So collation has started, and we are on top of the whole thing. We are asking people to be patient because we are aware that in some places, in some polling units, there were disruption of voting. But we are going ahead to ensure that we collate, and we are grateful to the police so far for the cooperation we receive from the police to secure our men and our materials. As at now, at this time, we are collecting.
Okay, we'll still have you more updates, and no matter the kind of updates we have here, you cannot compare them with the updates right there on the ground. We already have our colleague in Lokoja standing by to give us a blow-by-blow account of some of the things that took place. But before we join our Fisayo in Lokoja, we would continue here. Kabir, you are someone who have your mind very fixed and passionate about security matters. And this election brings up security issues so very glaringly. What are the updates you have for now?
I think so far so good. The assessment in both states that the election is going to be violent, as it were, has turned out in a way not to be what a lot of foretellers actually foretold would happen. Yes, there were pockets of this violence and disruptions here and there, but I think on the whole, the security agencies managed the elections. Remember that pre-election, during election, and the third phase is post-election. And with the history of electoral violence in Nigeria, post-election violence has usually been higher than the pre and the during election. So I'm very happy with the language and the body responses I've seen from both INEC and the security agencies with regards to their responsibilities post-election. Having said that, I'm a bit concerned with the influence of social media, as it were, in the elections, especially post-election. Already, if you go into social media, results are being posted. Some of the authors of this result are quote-unquote authorities. Now, I say that with, of course, in parentheses. The only authority that is allowed to announce the result is INEC. So what influence with this type of postings? Not everybody out there knows that it's only INEC that has that responsibility. So I think we've reached a stage in our development where we need to contend with the threat that social media poses with vis-a-vis national issues, including election, as it were.
Okay, well, I would really have loved to have Honorable Ahmed make his comment now, but Fisayo is ready there in Lokoja. So let's have him. Let me warn you, Honorable Ahmed, it's like you are the politician here. So we're going to ask you, when we return, how much of violence do politicians put in their strategy? You are Commissioner for Information and Strategy. So when we come back, we will talk to that. Well, for now, let's join Fisayo there in Lokoja.
Thank you, Femi. I could just barely get my cap on because we're just coming in from the field. It's been quite a hectic day, but the people of Kogi have gone out and casted ballots indicating, of course, the destination of the state for the next 4 years. We'll be getting information on how that will unfold. But someone is right here with me who has gone around the state or sent people around the state, and she's been here in Lokoja looking at how the the process has gone alongside other observers. I'm talking about Ideyat Hassan. She's the director, Center for Democracy and Development, CDD. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
You still look very fresh in spite of all the movements and the sun.
I don't look fresh. I'm very tired. It's been a day. We started as early as past 6, moving around the state to see what is actually happening. It's commendable because in the early hours of the day, the turnout was quite large, quite impressive, as the people were very ready to cast their votes to choose their leader for the next 4 years.
So let's take it one step after the other. There was accreditation, of course, and then we had all the processes. Looking at it, what are your comments in terms of logistics and how the umpire was able to deploy its staff and eventually, of course, midwife the process?
I think on the average it went on fine. They were able to deploy at least in several parts of the state, but some issues still impacted the logistics this time around. Largely the flood and where they are lower land, they had to travel. Even some they had to go all the way to local Suleja to reconnect. I think what is very, very key from this election when it came to logistics, it was not just the disappearance of this of some of the drivers or all the other perennial issues which has previously accompanied election logistics, but the issue of infrastructures. The fact that we have broken down infrastructure is really impacting elections in this country. And it tells us that in the next 4 years, before the 2023 elections, we have to do a lot in terms of road network. We have, in fact, it's very, very important. Waterways, electricity, all those are issues that the electoral umpire cannot actually provide. It is the responsibility of the states.
All right, let's look at, before all the, logistics, apart from that, we saw INEC engage with stakeholders, for instance, talking about the modus operandi of the day. But some issues still reared their ugly heads. What exactly do you think could be a challenge in terms of, voter education, in terms of perhaps even some acts of desperation by some of the stakeholders?
I think two critical issues emerge that has even brought down INEC on the scale of things. It's like, yes, there are election management bodies, but it has actually revealed that election is a stakeholders' affair. One is the issue of vote buying, or we call it vote trading, because it was not just the political parties who were buying votes, the people were also ready to sell their votes to these parties. That itself is a challenge. But nothing has actually marked this election more than the violence in several parts of the state. This violence has raised a lot of credibility issues because we had instances of intimidation of voters, intimidation of observers, intimidation of journalists, gunshots everywhere. Several hours behind, nobody would have been able to go out, let alone come to NTA to participate in this election. And it raises the issue of this zero-sum nature of politics itself. If the essence of politics or this election is I want to be in office is to represent the people, why do we resort to bringing it? I think what we have really experienced in Kogi today has dampened the morale of people. It has even started raising the question that why do we even have to keep monitoring or observing these elections if nothing changes, rather things actually get worse? Then what is the integrity of the whole process and the legitimacy of such outcome and whatsoever emerges. These are critical questions we really have to answer. And I think that these are touchy questions for most people, both citizens or observer alike. That after 20 years of democracy, when we should be talking of a maturing, we can no longer say our democracy is nascent. But instead of us celebrating gains in the electoral process, we are saying that politics is becoming gradually more and more zero-sum and what I call gunpoint democracy, where people are no longer relying on the will of the people, but they are relying on the power of the gun to actually get into office.
Okay, let's digress a bit and look at the people, the Kogi people themselves. In spite of all, the prognosis and perhaps some of the early warnings, we saw a huge chunk of, eligible voters come out.
Yes.
Early, willing and ready. At least, perhaps that is one good point.
It's a positive of these elections, actually. I think while we look at all the challenges, there are positives in the elections as well. The voter turnout was quite huge and are very early. I'll say that by 8 o'clock, the numbers on the queue, I was at Ghana 21, one of the largest area, 21 voting points in one primary school. And the numbers of people, including the elderly, was quite huge. I was another polling unit in Anyigba, and you in Ajaokuta rider. You see people, both men, queued separately, women, and everybody was ready to vote. Even in spite of the gunfire in several places, people still were not intimidated. They were ready. So that zeal of the Kogites to be involved in this election, irrespective of the challenges, must actually be commended. And we saw several instances where they were even following their vote to ensure that their vote eventually counts. So there are good things still that we can count on.
Okay, now let's let's look at a key aspect of this election, and that's perhaps the security architecture and how they have been able to assist INEC in carrying out this exercise. What will be your comment?
I think at the beginning of the elections, the policemen were very visible. For each of the stations, there were at least a policeman. In another one, there were many, 4 like that, and they were all unarmed. But the main challenge is we expected to see several of them outside the areas. Yes, within the polling precincts, they are not meant to be there carrying arms, but outside to secure. We had instances that they were overpowered, they scampered. We had instances where they could do nothing to actually contain some of this violent acts. Then what is the essence? Was it because of the sheer number? I think it's the sheer number, the fact that I will not also rule out a possible complicity. Although there are maybe...
perhaps we will not be able to establish that.
We cannot establish, allegedly. That's why I'm saying that we cannot rule it out, because they could actually be dressed in the uniform of police or other security agencies and not be one. But the fact that they were largely unharmed, the fact that they had to scamper for safety in several instances, the fact that they could not even contain vote buying, itself raises question in terms of the large deployments that is actually experienced. And all the issues being raised here is that election is a stakeholders affair. I think it's no longer okay to put the blame on one person and say, okay, it is the electoral management body, INEC, that has not done well. What about the voters who are selling their vote? What about the political class who are instrumentalizing violence as a way of winning office? In fact, the question, before I go to the security agency, what we are saying is this: how can we actually curb corruption? How can we fight corruption if all the processes that leads to the election of our representatives are flawed? There is no way we can actually get rid of corruption in this country.
Now let's look at the issue of logistics. I was out myself, yes. And in terms of movement of men and materials, especially to riverine areas, hinterlands, were you satisfied?
I think that things could have actually been better. And that's why I spoke about infrastructures. I think really there were instances where they were planning, there were instances they were actually loaded buses, but at the end of the day, the drivers were missing. So our report indicated that, so we were ready. In fact, as at yesterday, we had already projected that there might be some slight itches in logistics because having monitored the deployment from the CBN to INEC office to the racks, it was very, very obvious. So there were logistical challenges. But when you come to the riverine area, I also think that this topography, this very poor infrastructure, likely contributed to some of the logistic issues experienced in the election.
In terms of chronology, in terms of what we'll be expecting, especially now that the officers will be returning to base shortly, and then they'll be coming here. Let me inform the viewers, of course, that our studios are right here in front of the Coalition Center. We'll be expecting them to come from the different parts of the state, 21 local governments and the state borders, 9 other states. So perhaps that could be a logistical nightmare in itself in terms of the spread of states. We'll be expecting the officers to be returning one after the other. But in terms of the length of this exercise, are you expecting us to wrap up as in a short time, or you expect it to be a long day or a long night?
I think it will depend on the political actors themselves. If they want this election to wrap up as soon as possible and a winner emerges, then the violence will actually have to reduce, because we are at the point now that, of course, there are ongoing violence. We are monitoring the World Coalition at the CDA, and we know what is actually happening. From what now gradually they are moving to the local governments. If there were exceeding violence at that point, we will not be able to round up and declare the results by tomorrow morning or afternoon. So it depends on them. The fact is the onus is actually on the stakeholders.
Your analysis have been a bit dire, but I'm happy that you are here. Yes. Let's look at what we have seen in the past few days before now. Did we see enough to warn that we could have this kind of complexion?
Yes, I remember that our first report on Thursday actually spoke to this, and we were not speaking to these issues not just from what is evolving, because we've been in Kogi for the last 6 months working with partners to ensure that there is a free, fair and credible elections. It all pointed to it, and the history of elections in Kogi itself points to the same. If you look at the Kogi elections in 2015, it was no different. Even the 2019 elections, the problem is that if we know some of those selected local government, there has even been early warning. For instance, Tekina has been mentioned to be an area where we expect to see violence. It's an area that has been very previously violent. The problem is, what did we do to curtail the same that happened in 2015, in 2019 general elections, to not happen again? So it tells us that we do not instrumentalize early warning enough, we do not plan, and we are not using our history to actually resolve some of these issues.
All right, let me quickly just inform our viewers that the resident electoral commissioner supervising this whole assignment, talking about Professor James Apam, is already just over our shoulder at the Coalition Center here. Will be telling us exactly the state of play as far as this election is concerned. We'll be joining him shortly. While he's still getting sorted out, we would go into the Coalition Center right about now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm live, and so. Okay.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we are gradually coming to the end of what we started a few months ago. Elections were held in the entire state.
Talking is too much there. We need to listen to what
the governorship and for the Kogi West Senatorial District. Collation is going on in all parts of the state, and so we can't take results this evening. We'll have to start. Of course, we've received results.
Are we still doing our stuff?
Well, let me say the collation for Gorima-Congo has been completed.
Going there?
But that is just one local government, and so we plan to start the collation at the state level in earnest tomorrow at 9 a.m. And so we encourage everyone, the members of the press, the political party agents, members of the civil society, to turn up tomorrow morning for us to start the collation at 9 a.m. Thank you.
All right, that's the Resident Electoral Commissioner. I'll be giving you updates on events as they unfold there. We'll even try to get into the hall as well, and perhaps even get into. So let's come back to. Before we go, let's take your final analysis of today and your expectations.
I think that my today has been, in terms of the citizens, I actually commend the citizens, the Kogites, because not only were they frontal, ready to be involved in these elections, they've deployed themselves reasonably well. But it's quite unfortunate, the nature of politics. With each elections, the issue of politics, the nature of politics becomes questionable. The democracy itself, it's no longer sloganeering that we say that democracy is in danger. It's becoming endangered when people are trying to get into office at all costs, using the gun as a means. It's laying a very bad precedent, and actually it should be way forward for us. We should evolve. We should have elections where people can go on about their duties. We do not have to restrict movement. We can do anything. It should be like a celebration of joy, not of doom.
Thank you so very much. We've been talking to Hidayat Hassan, and she has been monitoring events here in Kogi. Let me quickly remove my earpiece so that I can show you a little thing. Yeah, we are right here, and let's just walk a bit and let's show you what is happening right here. Here is the Professor Mahmoud Yakubu Hall. It is where all these collations will happen. And in a few short hours, we'll be seeing materials and men coming in. You can see officials of the Independence National Electoral Commission looking at the hall. They've come to inspect, and here they are. You can see right now the hall is empty. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is where the announcements will be made. You can see the REC is inspecting what is happening, and this is where everybody will be. It's empty now, but of course it will be the center of action in a few short hours right here at the Coalition Center. We're right there outside. Of course, we'll be monitoring events as they happen. We'll be expecting, of course, the materials and men coming from the hinterland, from the riverine areas. And talking about the riverine area, Bayelsa, of course, is standing by, and of course, Abuja is standing by. We'll be giving you, events as they unfold and how the results are coming and the announcements. Because, of course, we are here to give you all that. So it's back to the studio.
Much, Fisayo. Thank you. Very thought-provoking discussion you had there with Hidayat Hassan. And back here in the studio in Abuja, before we go to Bayelsa, we have been joined by the special assistant to the DG of the National Orientation Agency. So we have a very rich panel here that should be interrogating the issues that have emanated, that have come from the elections in Kogi and Bayelsa. Now, Honorable Ahmad, you had the discussion from Lokoja, and before we went to Lokoja, we had started gravitating towards that area. All through the evening, possibly, I watched that session, and it was a lamentation session where we all are brooding about the level of violence in our elections, and these are just 2 states. We couldn't curtail it. You were talking seriously. You were Commissioner for Information and Strategy. As Commissioner for Information and Strategy and a politician, how much violence did you strategize when you were in government, in elections?
This is unfair.
No, I mean, these are politicians. Politicians are the ones doing this.
But let us be very serious about this.
I am serious.
The number one thing is that let us, very sincerely commend INEC for this time around. Not just because of the manner they handled the process, but because when the people were talking about the violence, INEC came up with a press release to own up to the fact that there were violence in the process. In the past, the process itself and render it not credible. So we must commend INEC for accepting, and we hope that it's a part of lesson learning at this point. I said it earlier in the afternoon that INEC had involved a lot of intellectuals in the electoral process, but we have not started seeing the full benefit of this intellectual exercise. There are no researches on why certain things happen and why certain things should happen the way they happen. One of them we discussed this afternoon was that why must INEC insist all the time that we must start our election by 8 o'clock? Since it looks like, based on what she's talking about, logistics issues and things like that, you cannot take materials before dawn, because it means you'll be moving those materials in darkness, and you are jeopardizing, their safety and security, and even the safety and security of the people that are going to take them. And then when you start in the daytime, most places you have difficulties getting to those places. And so why don't we begin to look at these issues very seriously and say whether we could just lift the time a little. Second, I think we must also commend the security agencies, because they have the most difficult tasks. If they come out in full force, the next story is that security was used to intimidate voters. If they behave in a civil manner and they stand guard the way they are supposed to do in a civilized climate, the people who come to cause this mayhem carry arms and intimidate them. She's saying that they have to take cover. They have to take cover. They're human after all. They are security, yes, but they are human. So they have tried. They have also owned up to the fact that violence had taken place. We must also commend the electorate. In spite of everything, you heard her. She said there was a large voter turnout. It then means that whatever is being done to ginger people to come out and exercise their franchise is being. And we were told that in Kogi, for example, about 52%, there's a record of 52% early attendance, delivery of materials and attendance, and that is a marked improvement, and that is something commendable. But we must, like he said, condemn those who are using social media to create problems. I have seen, I'm not being told, I was monitoring, I have seen somebody post a violent activity that took place that had nothing to do with the elections, but claimed that it was part of the violence that is taking place in one of the places where elections are held. I have seen somebody post full results before 2 o'clock, before even the time of the elections are closed for certain polling units. That again is wrong. So for as long as we, using the accessibility of internet-based capacity to communicate, also communicate confusion. Okay. We are adding. But let me tell you,
please,
politically,
we'll have a lot of time for that.
Okay.
Let me welcome David Akoji and have his initial comment, just 1 minute comment, because we have to go to Bayelsa. We have had Lokoja now. Let's go to Bayelsa. But please give us just your initial thoughts about the processes so far. 1 minute.
Okay, we have heard all kinds of reports coming out of both Bayelsa and Kogi. The extent to which those reports are true yet to be fully determined, but we have heard of very serious allegations, and it's worrisome. The activities of thugs in our elections is still unabating, in spite of, like he said, the tremendous efforts made by both INEC and the police. We need to find solutions to these challenges.
Thank you very much, David Akoji. That's the representative of the National Orientation Agency. Now in Yanagwa, Ameze is already set to receive us and give us an update and lead us into the night events so far. Ameze, it's are you ready? Are you here with us? Or we continue our discussion? They're not okay. Amazing. Okay. Okay, then
that's why the side studio is on. Thank you very much, Femi, for joining us here. We are still at the INEC headquarters, and the electorate has spoken. Votes have been counted. Collation is ongoing, and very shortly we will be giving you an update of what the resident electoral commissioner has said. Monday Udo, he made an announcement a while ago, and we will start on that premise. But before then, I'd like to tell you that with me in the studio there are gentlemen here who will be reviewing the entire process of how the election went in Bayelsa State. My immediate left, I have a legal practitioner, Stanley Demabide. It's good to have you, sir. Thank you for joining us. And on my far left is Ezenwa Wagu, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Before we get into where the REC just a while ago told us the next process to go.
So good. We believe that we have done a great job today by all of us. At this moment, we thought we would be collecting the result of the election. But you all agree with me that the topography of Bayelsa State is not that easy. And because of that, we may not be able to start this night. I just wish to tell you that by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, this hall is going to be open for all of us, and we hope to have the results trickling in, and we'll take them as they come. On behalf of the management staff of INEC Bayelsa State, I wish you a pleasant night. Thank you.
Tomorrow morning, like the REC has said, Monday Udo, we will be giving you highlights of what actually went down as far as the electorate voices is concerned. I want to throw up this very important question. Let's just give an overview of what we saw today in Bayelsa. I want to start with Ezenwa.
Okay, I think thank you for. We've been talking about that almost all day. The watching the votes midday statement had come out, and we had listed 7 electoral processes that we engage with, which is first of all the opening of the polls. And I think events have now overtaken that. We have had the places where polls didn't open when they should, and that in places where it did open well, it came out. We've had voting and accreditation is over, and as we speak, of course, we are now in the process of collation of results. And we also do now know that there will not be collation at the state level until about 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Yeah, but generally, I will say that in comparative terms, if you make a comparison between 2015 and today, what comes out clearly is that you are seeing elections concluded in Bayelsa State in one stretch. And I think it's not something to be taken for granted. If you understand, if you move around as we have done, even the people themselves are excited. They are happy. They are happy that they could achieve this. You know, when we were coming here, a lot of people thought that we needed lifeguards to be able to swim. They thought we would need vests, you know, bulletproof vests and helmets and all of that. But like I said in one or two occasions in Bayelsa, we prayed that the people of Bayelsa would disappoint the politicians and their supporters who will not want to be part of clean elections. We've seen relatively peaceful election. There were, like everyone has said, pockets of violence. Some of the things that continue to diminish us, the issue of ballot snatching in 2019 is ridiculous that there are people who still thinking in that way. It's ridiculous there are people who will still be thinking of burning. It's ridiculous that people will still be manhandling election observers and people who have come to bring credibility to and integrity to the process. But all of those things are in the mix. But as we go on, we can confidently say that we are going to sleep well tonight in Bayelsa, and everybody who has come to observe this election will not have a sense of anxiety that they came with.
Okay. Thank you so much. Stanley, what do you make of the process? The narrative is gradually changing. It is not Uhuru yet. What are those things that we must put in place to ensure that in no distant time the story will surely be a better one to tell in Bayelsa?
Thank you. But firstly, I was into observing and monitoring. I actually drove to a place called Angalabri, about 1 hour, 20 minutes from Yenagua, to cast my vote. And things went on very well there. It was more like a fanfare. You know, participation was huge, and people just wanted to do what they think they should do. You know, but with reference to the question that you asked and what Izenwa said, regarding the issues of snatching of ballot boxes and thuggery, burning of places and all that, it's simple. People get away with these things, so they are bound to continue with them. As a matter of fact, it pays to do some of these things, in the sense that you do it, you get the result you're looking for, and there are no scruples. So unless and until we rise up to the occasion, discipline and punish, and make sure that such things will not yield results for those that are involved in it, I'm afraid that they might continue. These things will continue. So it is for us, particularly the security agencies, to rise up to the occasion of ensuring that persons are disciplined and as such deterred from continuing with things like that. And also to ensure that they don't reap the if it no longer pays, there will be no need for anybody to. I observed happenings around, and what I saw was, perceived victors celebrating and, really feeling excited that they were able to participate and ensure that their vote counts. I think that's beautiful.
The skirmishes we have experienced, obviously, are handiworks of a few mischief makers, and we are of a larger number, those patriotic Nigerians who want to see things get better, who want to ensure that our democracy is no longer described as nascent. What do you think we can do to ensure that these people who are constituting clogs in the wheel of progress are stopped in their tracks?
I think it's very clear, and my colleague just hit it straight. If there is reward for bad behavior, if there is nothing, there is no reason for behaving well. So we've continued to make the argument for the setting up of Electoral Commission. And the reason for that is that, as you have seen now, these twin elections in Kogi and Bayelsa meant that you had to move security agents from nearby states or even far-flung areas to come work in this place. So even if arrests are made, there are not going to be follow-up. The people who made the arrests, latest by Tuesday, Wednesday, they are out of town, and there is no continuity in terms of getting. So we need specific, instruments that will face the issue of electoral impunity. Our constitution, our electoral act did not contemplate that you will still have people in this age and time behaving the way we have seen politicians behave in terms of getting power. And so you need to address that challenge frontally. The next important thing is to continue to encourage the electorates. And I want to use this opportunity to celebrate the electorates in Bayelsa State. I think their enthusiasm, I think their resilience, I think their willingness to come out has also shamed those who felt that there was not even going to be election. In fact, in many quarters, while we were doing some programs, they will tell you, oh, the results have already been written, oh, there is no need for people to come out. But the people have shown, we have seen people clutching their babies to come out to vote. I took photographs with very old women, in certain places, excitedly coming to vote. And what that means is that the people believe that this democracy will change their lives. The people believe that good governance will come from continued participation in this process. And I think that one of the ways to encourage them is to ensure that we do not just stop at elections, that we also have the way to ensure that this democracy works for the people. This staying under the rain, this scaling the floods to come and vote, this insisting that the floods cannot intimidate them, has to be rewarded by good governance.
As a one, the floods did not intimidate Bayelsans.
Yes.
We have a report on that put together by Ebinimi Zitimi Yola. We want to take the report of Ebinime, where she told us that Bayelsans turned out massively to exercise their franchise at the governorship election across the state. Said there were a few reported cases of skirmishes, but that did not actually deter them.
The Bayelsa State governorship election was relatively peaceful, except for some pockets of skirmishes and some areas where there were alleged reports of material hijack and shootings. Former President Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, Bayelsa State Governor Siriaka Dixon, and Minister for Petroleum Resources Chief Timipre Silva are among other eligible voters who participated in the election and cast their votes in the various units.
Whatever we do in selecting who will be our president, or selecting who will be our governors, selecting who will be our local government chairman, reflects on society. And if you bring people that are not competent, you cannot turn around to begin to blame government. Our nation must develop every citizen, not just about president, ministers, parliamentarians. No, everybody must do his work properly.
In Nembe, taking place in southern Niger, where materials meant for voters have been systematically taken away by hoodlums.
There are a few skirmishes here and there in Sabama and places like Keremo, but we are not heard of any other problem anywhere in Bayelsa.
The turnout of voters was much across the 1,804 polling units of the 8 local government areas of the state, including communities that are impacted by flood. Ebinimi Zitimiola, NTA News.
Still talking about the high enthusiasm displayed by Bayelsans, we want to bring another report, this time by Onengie Fineface. He says the resilience of Bayelsans to make history with the power of their vote was given in a practical expression this election day. It took the form of courage against the force of nature. While on election duty, he met with a few of those people who displayed bravery. So we would like to take that report by Onengie Fineface.
The community now, you see, everywhere is flooded. People are packing from their various houses, and for now, everywhere is flooded. That's just the truth.
How does this affect you?
It affects me a lot. Your daily activities and all the rest. Maybe you just pack from your place to unknown destination. Maybe the comfort, especially, you don't have comfort.
Going by the testimony of Dakolo Amapere, I am very eager to see how Bahrain Ekpetiama will look like, seeing the flood level, which is very high. And from this distance, you can see the community just at the bank of the river. There are people on the bank. I'm sure that by the time we get in there, we'll see more of how this flood is affecting the community and how the members of the community are responding to the flood, bearing in mind the fact that this is election day and they need to come out to cast their ballot. We want to know whether the flood will hold them back or whether or not they are going to defy the challenges posed by this flood to participate in the election process. So, to Bahrain we go. We had a flooded entry to Ekpetiama, and the electorates are out to experience a flooded election process. The water level is very high, water coming out from the community down to the river, and these electorates are defying the unfavorable weather condition to participate in the process.
People have their anxiety to come and vote who they want them to be their leader. That is why no matter the flood, so many people out are submerged, they were not even in town. But because of the election since yesterday, they are here. Some of them even slept outside to ensure that they cast their vote, perform their franchise.
Onengie Fineface, NT News.
The same situation played out in Agudama, Ekpetiama in Yenegua local government area. Timinepre Ohia reports that despite the ravaging flood in these communities, the turnout of voters for the election was very, very high. Let's hear the rest from him.
The flood at Agudama Ekpetiama Unit 10, Ward 10, voters were not deterred as they are fired up, as you can see behind me. Here with me is an elderly woman waiting eagerly to cast a vote.
Now, waiting pain me when I come out from water, come vote here. We don't do suffer. We don't do suffer. So I will come and vote so that when the appointed man come and sit, we all will benefit.
It's been peaceful. As long as I can observe, it's been peaceful. No chaos, no reason for concern.
We had issues with the card reader, though the rec technician came and rectified
smoothly. As you can see, the election is going on smoothly. For now, no violence. Every person is coming out in their numbers to come and vote, to decide for who to be our next governor.
We know the threat areas, and as the votes are counting, that can also generate some form of crisis. So the men are on ground, even throughout today, with those expectations, and even the next day, Sunday.
The card reader is not functioning well. Some cards, the names are not showing, so some people are not voting just because of the card reader. So they are preparing to bring a new card reader. So we are waiting for it.
Masoma community play host to the Niger Delta University here in Southern Ijo local area. Despite the flood that ravaged some parts of the community, the electorate say they are not deterred to cast their ballots to elect who will govern them in the next 4 years. From Southern Ijoba government area in Amasoma, Simenopri, or here, NTA News.
This report, gentlemen, have shown that Nigerians are eager, they are aspiring and yearning for a better Nigeria where the needed infrastructural development is given to them. We heard one of the respondents in that report that, well, she has come out to ensure that she makes a choice of the right person who will bring about the needed change in that community. It shows the level of awareness and consciousness about election, and the power of governance is becoming very high, even among the not too literate members of our society. But before then, we got this report we talked about. We got the report from the media center, the announcement by the resident electoral commissioner Monday Udo. Does it mean that we are going to be for a very long day? Because he says result announcement will commence by 9 o'clock. What do you think is responsible for this shift?
Well, I think that the election administrators need to take a cue from the resilience of voters. We can't continue to hoist this regime of excuses about topography. We have seen that the people themselves scaled the flood. You understand? They showed that resilience. So Bayelsa didn't happen on us. And I keep saying this. The things that diminishes us. Idayat was talking from the Kogi studio, and she talked about how we don't learn from history. So when we have done with all of this that we have learned will peter into insignificance. We will not, it will not come to anything. We are not going to use it for anything. We should come to that point where we can have elections and announce the results. To say everybody go home 9 o'clock, you come back tomorrow, and the funny part of it is that we're going to still be here by 9, you may still not have these things concluded. We must get to that point where we fast track these issues so that we can put away, put conflict entrepreneurs to sleep and make sure that those who bandy, have truths, twisted results and all of that do not have a place to thrive on. But having said that, we can understand that some of these results are coming in from the PU to the ward level and to the registration areas down to the states. It will take a while, but what is important is that the people of Bayelsa and the people of Kogi State now have the responsibility to maintain this peace, to ensure that at the end of the day, this process comes to a conclusion that meets the expectation of all the people of Kogi and Bayelsa states that have paid this, that have made this sacrifice. This sacrifice needs to be rewarded, and one way to reward it is to make sure that all of this comes to a logical conclusion.
Okay, you are asking for sustenance of the temple of enthusiasm. How can we achieve that, Stanley? How can we achieve this sustenance of the temple of enthusiasm?
Well, it is to ensure that what the electorates go out to do is actually justifiably sustained at the level of announcement of results and all that. And referring to what Ezen said, I would just say that so long as we continue to harbor phobia for technology and still have to rely on the manual process of transmitting and handing over results, time will continue to suffer with regard to when results will be announced. So if we address that, see how we can, sort out this phobia for technology that we have with regards to collation and related things in our elections, I think we will have gone a long way to address some of the issues. And then let's ensure that what was displayed with regards to choices that were made should reflect in the results that will be announced. That way, people will be more emboldened, like the old lady, she impressed me so much, that yes, my vote will actually count. and it can make a change. I think she expressed anger for the status quo and a strong desire for a change. I hope she gets it tomorrow.
I want to believe that will be your final words for us this evening, that Nigerians are yearning for the needed change.
Yes, and the umpires should ensure that when their wishes are expressed through the choice they make in voting, that should be respected and preserved.
Okay. Ezewan, your final thoughts.
Yeah, so the political parties also have a responsibility to rein in their supporters. The candidates must now begin to address their supporters to maintain the peace, to ensure that they learn from the hero of Bayelsa State, who has come to say, look, who after this kind of situation, conceded to the one who considered defeat magnanimously, and it has become a template and should be a template for other politicians to learn from. And I think it's important that they take that cue. So from tomorrow, the message must be that election has come and gone, and it's a contest between families, it's a contest between relations, it's a contest between people who have blood ties. So at the end of the day, we must come to that point where we say congratulations to the winner, and the winner also must be magnanimous in victory and take everybody together.
Thank you, gentlemen. Stanley Dimabide, a legal practitioner, and of course Ezewan Wagu, chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. We do hope that the needed reforms will be put in place and done so very quickly, so that the enthusiasm of the electorate will not be doused. We are done here. Bayelsa Studios, the side studio is done. We will be rejoining Femi in our Abuja studios, and we will be bringing you updates of events as they unfold at the INEX Center here and in other places in town. Thank you very much, Femi.
Thank you to Ameze, and we truly have enjoyed the good news coming in from Bayelsa there. It's news that helps us to balance the story. We've had the Kogi side, and now we have had the Bayelsa side, so it helps us to know, to have a good picture of what transpired during the day. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back for more discussions here in the Abuja studio.
Much talked about November 16 governorship and Kogi West rerun senatorial election is here, and everyone is excited. In Tombia, and electors are still on the queue waiting to cast their ballot.
Process, which is also a very critical process. But before we go into that, I think Lokoja has another update for us, and so we'll just join Fisayo again in Lokoja.
Thank you very much. I can see your face there. We are on the field, and and of course, it's been quite a hectic day. It's been very sunny in the course of the day, but we thank God the weather has calmed down somewhat. Now, I have someone in the house, Idris Miliki, is an election observer. He was here yesterday, and he told us, he was optimistic about the process. Now he's brought back a few reports to tell us a bit about what he saw on the field. Idris Miliki, well, first let me apologize for keeping you waiting a bit. I can see you're tired, but tell us a bit about what you saw on the field.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It has been a long day. And then it's a concluding aspect of the times table that emerged or commences on the May 16th. Election has been held. That is what more importantly, no matter the attributes, no matter what we have observed, election has been held in Kogi State. And we have seen, at least I traveled no less than 75 kilometers, and I cover average of about 4 local governments, or have to touch 1 or 2, and no less than 25 polling units. So, like I said, election has been held in Kogi, but we have observations. From the INEC aspect of it, every polling unit commences election as stipulated by 8 o'clock. There are places that it is even up to 9 or after 9 before material actually arrives. That also delay. Then in terms of issue of turnout, there are places where turnout was impressive, there are places where it is low. So it is not something that is uniform. But the unfortunate thing is the fact that we observe the fact that politicians are desperate. And when you are desperate in a game like this, election is a game that a winner must emerge. Every other person is a participant in an election. So why people go into election with desperation? Do you really have to do all they have done to serve the people? Do you have to bribe people? Do you have to buy vote? For people you are going to serve. And that is why we are suspicious. And that is why we've been saying this, that why should politicians close to election are giving money to electorate, are buying vehicles and giving all sorts of things that are not issue-based to say, okay, this is what I've done. And that has affected this kind of election, which people have to be killed, ballot boxes have to be started at this level of our development in Nigeria. It is unfortunate, it is disappointing, and it is highly embarrassing.
All right, let's look at a little bit of a timetable. Let's look at, right here in Lokoja, the election officials rounded up most of their, activities at about 6 o'clock. Aoun Yakubu Onotu, rushed out and got 1 or 2 while they were rounding up to begin, to bring their processes, the programs home. Of course, he was able to catch up, I think, 1 or 2. Let's look at Yakubu Onotu's report earlier in the day.
Well, as you can, I am at Ata Open Field, Ward C Unit 5 polling unit. The story you see here is the same across the whole of Lokoja local government. Polling officials have concluded elections and they are simply packing their stuff to leave the polling units. That's the same story you have here. And we'll go to talk to one of the officials. You tell us, what is your name, ma'am?
I'm Zuleihat Mahmoud. Zuleihat Mahmoud.
So, what is the situation?
Well, the situation was good. Voters came out in mass to cast their vote. It was a free and fair election.
So, any story from there?
No, there was no story. It was a success. Thank you, sir.
You've heard it from her. That is the presiding officer of the polling unit. The exercise has ended and they are simply leaving here now to go back to the local government office of the INEC. That's the story from here. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Yakubu Onotu there. He did that much earlier. We would give you another report, still by Yakubu, and that was just a couple of minutes ago. Let's look at the process. You just spoke about the topography of the state and how big it is. What are we expecting now in terms of timelines, and which are the ballots that you expect to come in the latest, the earliest, based on your experience?
It is not something that is uniform. There are certain certain parameters that could delay or assist or hasten the result of an election. For instance, in Lokoja local government, Lokoja is hosting the state. But if you go to places like Abugi takes about 4 hours to get to Lokoja. So in that context, Abugi has always been an issue of delay because of it's a riverine community. And you cannot fly boat in the night to Lokoja, which will have taken maybe ordinarily 1.5 hours. So places like Abugi, despite it is in Lokoja local government, we are going to have delay. So is the terrain. What about places like Basa? That also have some challenges that is there. So these are the things we need to look into. That's why even before the election, we did what we call a flood risk map. So these are the things that can affect the performance of either the umpire or even the voters themselves. So, but as it is now, because of this 1 or 2 security challenges that we had, coalitions are not taking place. At what level? They are bringing everything into a center at local government level, and that can also delay. Because even the time you consume in bringing this item to the local government, INEC local government offices could also affect it. But I think by and large, despite there are skepticism, there are 1 or 2 issues that we have observed. I think generally, as at this moment, in Lokoja, where we are presently, and some of our contract, everything remains calm. Maybe by the time the result is trickled in, an announcement is made. And that's why we need to make a proactive measure on post-election reaction by whoever. So it is very key. As it is now, we are okay. It's a bit calm, but we are having some level of concern about the outcome and when announcements are made. Is there any mapping that is taking place? Is there any privileged information that is taking place? How are the stakeholders, the media, the society, the umpire and the security, is there any level playing field for everybody to be able to air their own opinion? So I think we need to put measure in place, a proactive measure to be able to receive the reaction that will take place after the announcement is made, either at what level or either at local government level until the final one is done.
Early in the morning when I went, a lot of voters coming out to participate. In your own assessment, the areas you went to outside of Lokoja, what was the turnout like?
That's what I've said earlier, that the turnout is certainly fair in some places
compared to other elections.
Yeah, I think it's a bit better in this case. It's a bit better that there are places where you also find that INEC have certain challenges which must be addressed, and this kind of a level of the issue of delimitation. There are expansions. For instance, if you go to places like Obajana and look at the distance people have to travel to come and vote, there is restriction. These are all sorts of things that is affecting voters' turnout. When you have stayed for several years and there are no limitations, there are expansions, there are development, and people have to travel to 2-3 kilometers just to come and participate and to vote. They prefer to stay at home when even the people who are voting for themselves are not delivering. There are no accountability, there are no transparency, there are no development. So you ask yourself, does it really want to trek 2 kilometers to go and vote for somebody at the end of the day will turn his or her back on you? So these are all the facts that is there. So people need to know, and I think INEC as a body must take it very seriously, that as soon as we conclude this election by next year, we must commence the process of delimitation.
All right, talking about life moving on, and of course, we've talked about tension and all that, but right here in Lokoja, it's as if life is moving on because people have come out. At least originally they came out in droves earlier to vote. Now they are coming back again this time to pick a snack or two after the election frenzy is over. Again, we sent out our own UPPT's reporter, Yakubu Lotu, and he came back with this one of election night.
It is now hours since the end of the electioneering process in Lokoja, following sorting and counting of ballots. But the usual nightlife is yet to return to the ancient town.
As for yesterday, this time we know what to sold. But today I'm sure it's because of the election. We don't see people out.
Sunday, Monday, it's a long weekend. So that I cannot leave them like that. I have to get something for them. So you see me, I'm still chatting for what I will buy, what I will get for them.